Is that when when Barbara asked me to do this, she wanted me to talk about my childhood and what we did in Ridgeville. Well, I decided I wasn't going to do that.
Okay, Albert.
I think what I'm going to do is talk about how Ridgeville was when I was a child and how it has changed up until today. And it is amazing, I can tell you that. First off is, before I even start on this paperwork I got here, Ridgeville ran from Pike Crossing, which is where the railroad spur comes in on 144. But there was two railroad spurs there, and Pike Crossing started in between the two. The first railroad spur is where the sediment pond is behind the industrial park. That's down there. And then Ridgeville ran all the way past where Five Guys is, if anybody knows where Five Guys is, and the, a mattress store there too, to Jackson's house. And I'll go over the houses that were still left in Ridgeville, but it went to Jackson's house, and then it was Parsville from there all the way down to the bottom of the hill, which Parsville and Pike Crossing were two black communities. And when I was a kid, we had no problems with race problems in Mount Airy, Ridgeville, or anywhere else. And if I make any mistakes on this, I'm sure Jimmy will correct me, or a few other people in here that I grew up with. My family also, from what my grandmother told me, they lived from plane number 4, which some people may not know where plane number 4 is, but it's Woodville Road 144. They had planes, they called them, because that was when they had to pull the trains up by mule over each plane. So there's 7 planes between Baltimore and Frederick. They lived from plane number 4 to Ridgeville, and it goes back, as far as I know, probably further, but it was Norwood, and it goes 5 generations of my family's been in this community and area.
Yeah, I have a picture of your grandmother in one of Wayne's families.
Yeah, there was a cousin that did a history, and I think she worked for the bank, in fact, in Frederick. And it was a third, third or fourth cousin, and she traced it all the way back. There's people out here on, I forget which horse farm it is, and families are buried on a plot out there, 2 or 3 people that she showed it to me one time. But let me start this thing about Ridgeville. Okay. Ridgeville had 4 of the 6 car and truck dealerships in the town of Mount Airy. The Pontiac dealership, owned by Harry Hahn, was located where Enterprise is. Jones Motors, the Plymouth and Dodge, owned by Mac Molesworth, Bud Hahn, and Kenny Harshman, was where the Bank of America is. Boers Motors International Truck, owned by Ben and Harry Boer, is where the vacant building is across from the car wash, which was a furniture store after it was the International Truck Garage. It was also the Greyhound bus stop, because I go back far enough when the Greyhound bus stopped. In the mornings and in the evening, the bus from Baltimore going west and the bus going east to Baltimore would stop. The Chevrolet dealership, owned by Warfield, was on Route 27, which is Main Street. It is where the vacant lot is now. That building burnt, if you remember the big fire that was there, was the original garage. The other 2 dealerships were the Ford and the building across from the old firehouse downtown, owned by Charlie Aller, and the Mercury, owned by Butler, and I believe his first name was Nate. It was where the car repair shop across from the town parking lot is on Park Avenue. Hard to believe that a small town had that many dealerships. Now we have 2, which is owned by the same company, which is the Jeep and Chrysler and the Ford. Ridgeville had 3 gas stations: Sinclair at the Jones Motors, Texaco at Boers Motors, and the Gulf at Holmes Tire. Most of the houses in Ridgeville had chicken coops, gardens, and grapevines. Almost all of them had coal for heat, then later oil. Businesses in Ridgeville at the time, besides the dealerships when I was a kid, was Snyder's Amusement, which was Carnival Rides, and is where the tar shop is now. Snyder also had a funeral home there in the 30s. There were 2 bars and restaurants, Brown's Diner. A new building is under construction where the original was, and that's beside the old International dealership. And I believe the other was owned by Clary, which is on the corner where the Ridgeville gas station is. It was a house with the bar restaurant downstairs, located where Ridgeville gas station is now. Later on, it was run by Link Gosnell and then Jerry Hall. I'll get back to that later. Grocery store called Browning's Grocery, run by Robert Browning, your father.
It's called Bob's Market.
It was Bob's Market. That's the only thing I ever remember being in that store, was a grocery store from the time I was a kid. But I'll get to what was originally there, going back. Located where the barber shop is now. It was later run by Earl Baker as a grocery until one night in 60 or 61 he was robbed, shot, and killed. As far as I know, that was the only murder that was ever in Mount Airy or Ridgeville at that time. After that building stayed vacant for a long period of time until the 70s, it was remodeled and made into an apartment. That building and the house next door was my home house. That is where the Ridgeville car wash is now. The house was built in 1892, and where the barber shop is was built in 1890 by my great-grandfather. It was a dry goods store run by my great-grandfather's brother. Ridgeville also had a tar recap shop owned by Starrett Homes that is now Taylor's Auto Clinic. Now back to where the Ridgeville gas station is. It was in the mid-60s when I was in the Army that some of the houses' wells were running low on water, and they requested to be incorporated into the town to have water lines run to Ridgeville. That was where a problem was created with the Link Gosnell's Bar restaurant. Brown's Diner had already closed. The town did not want a bar in town limits. Had not been any in the town since before Prohibition. The town tried to incorporate Ridgeville by cutting Gosnell's property out. The county told the town they could not make an enclave out of the Gosnell property. They did not want a bar in the town. Well, what the town did at that time, they came down Main Street to Gosnell's property, turned left, came up 144, turned right on the other side of Gosnell's property, went back to the back part of Gosnell's property, turned right and came back out to 27, and then went up and brought the line behind all the houses that were in Ridgeville. Yeah, that's how the fathers didn't want any bars in the town. And of course today we have quite a few more places that sell alcohol along with food or just sell alcohol. There was 3 farms in Ridgeville. The Ramsburg farm where the industrial park is below Food Line. The Ron farm was behind the house on the dead end of Main Street. And it is where 808 is part of Main Street now. And that farm came around behind the houses that's on the dead end of 808, used to be 27. Farm came around behind it and went all the way across where the bypass is now, all the way down to where the shopping center is across 27. The third was behind Dunkin' Donuts and went all the way to Ridge Avenue, and where Dunkin' Donuts is, it was behind all the houses on the north side of Ridgeville Boulevard, where the Walmart and Safeway shopping center is today. I don't know who owned that one. The community going west past the Ramsburg farm was Pike Crossing. The community on the other side of the 27 bypass was Parsville. There was 2 junkyards there, the Lauder and Martell. Ridgeville Nursery was located where Food Line is now. All that property was greenhouses. The building that is Anita Liquor was their office. The property where McDonald is where they had trees and shrubs that went all the way to where the Reg 27 bypass is now. That was behind all the houses on the south side of Ridgeville Boulevard. There are houses that are left in Ridgeville. Can't remember who owned the house where the smoke shop is next to the gas station. There was a bunch of different people in there when I was a kid that moved in and out. The next house where the funeral home is was Jones and Molesworth's house. The beauty shop was the Baker House, which was also originally built by my great-grandfather's brother, and he lived in that. The car wash was my home. Next was Ridgeville United Methodist Church. Gew House is where the consignment store is next to the tire shop. The house on the north side of Ridgeville Boulevard at the top of the hill where the stoplight is was Hahn. The only other houses on that side of the street, you gotta go past Five Guys, and it was Charlie Oller's house, and the next house was Jackson's house. That was going west from Main Street or left. They are the only houses left when I was a child. All the houses going east are gone from the stoplight at Walmart. Was 10 more in Ridgeville at that time. Ridgeville also had a spring that was on the left-hand side past the entrance to Food Line on Ridgeville Boulevard at the bottom of the hill where the railroad spur runs into Mount Airy, which is not there anymore. And that was some of the freshest, coldest spring water you'd ever drink. I drank from that spring many a time, and the railroad had put a brick type of thing over top of the spring head, had a pipe coming out of it, and the water came out of that pipe. A lot of people, when their wells started to go dry in Mount Airy in the winter, in the summertime, would go down there and get water and bring it back to their houses. It was the B&Os. When people in Ridgeville, like I said, got dry on water in the summertime, they would get their water from there. It was still being used into the mid-70s or 80s before it was polluted by the people washing their cars there and the trailers squatting on the railroad property above the spring with sewer runoff running into it. The B&O completely closed it off. A little history on the roads in and around Ridgeville. Ridgeville Boulevard was the Baltimore National Pike, the main road from Baltimore west. All the traffic came right by my house. In 1953 to 54, US 40 was completed and the Baltimore National Pike became Route 144. US 40 was upgraded to 6 lanes in the mid to late 70s. All the crossovers were eliminated and bridges were built between 144 and the roads on the side of Interstate 70. The 27 bypass was done in 1972. That is how much Ridgeville has changed since my childhood. And that's the end.